There's a moment right after pressure arrives where people begin to move too quickly. Not because they're clear, but because they're uncomfortable. And discomfort has a way of convincing people that movement itself is wisdom. But it's not. Sometimes movement is clarity, and sometimes movement is panic with good branding. I've learned something over the last few years, especially through loss, through transition, through rebuilding, through uncertainty, that urgency can distort your relationship with yourself. Because when pressure shows up, most people stop listening. They stop observing, stop discerning, stop reflecting, and instead they start reacting. They rush decisions, rush relationships, rush explanations, rush healing, rush identity. Because silence under pressure feels unbearable when you haven't learned how to govern yourself inside uncertainty. But clarity, real clarity, almost never arrives through force. It arrives through observation, through steadiness, through enough internal quiet to actually recognize what is true. And I think this is one of the hardest lessons for people who carry responsibility, people who carry vision, people who are trying to rebuild something meaningful. Because there's this internal pressure to make something happen, to prove momentum, to prove progress, to prove you're not stuck. But I've realized there's a difference between motion and aligned movement. And if you don't know the difference, you can spend years exhausting yourself while slowly drifting out of alignment. I know what it feels like to want answers immediately, to want certainty immediately, to want restoration immediately, to want the next chapter to arrive faster than it naturally unfolds. But wisdom has been teaching me something different. Not passive waiting, not avoidance, not fear, governance, learning how to stay present long enough for the truth to reveal itself before making unnecessary moves. And honestly, that takes strength. more strength than reaction does. Because reaction feels powerful in the moment, but governed presence requires restraint. It requires trust. It requires emotional discipline. And sometimes faith looks less like charging forward and more like remaining steady long enough to recognize the right path when it actually appears. I think about this a lot now, especially when it comes to alignment. There are environments, relationships, expectations, versions of yourself that you can outgrow quietly. And when that happens, urgency will try to convince you to force what really no longer fits. To hold on to spaces that your spirit already knows you've moved beyond. But clarity allows you to release things without hatred, without performance, without chaos, without needing revenge or validation. Just recognition. And there's a peace in that. A different kind of peace. Not always comfort. Not escape. Alignment. I've also learned that clarity has a pace. And when you violate that pace repeatedly, you create internal friction. You start living ahead of your spirit, ahead of your discernment, ahead of your emotional processing. And eventually, your body begins to carry tension your wisdom was trying to warn you about. That's why I no longer worship urgency. I pay attention to signal. What produces peace? What produces distortion? What produces steadiness? What produces unnecessary noise? Because not every opportunity is alignment. Not every connection is assignment. Not every open door should be walked through immediately. Some things require observation first. Some things require silence first. Some things require maturity first. And I think that's difficult in a world that rewards immediacy. Everybody wants instant outcomes, instant identity, instant success, instant healing, instant visibility. But depth almost never develops instantly. Even refinement has rhythm. And if you interrupt the process too early, you can mistake incomplete formation for final identity. I think that's part of what this season has been teaching me personally. Not to abandon movement, but to govern it. Not to suppress ambition, but to align it. Not to force expansion, but to steward it properly when it arrives. Because there's a difference between building from clarity and building from fear of standing still. And people can feel the difference. One creates signal, the other creates noise. And maybe that's what I want people to understand the most in this episode. Stillness is not failure. Discernment is not weakness. Taking time to see clearly is not falling behind. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is refuse to let pressure rush your spirit. Because pressure will always try to accelerate you beyond your discernment. But governance brings you back into alignment with truth. And the truth is, you don't need to force what's meant to unfold with clarity. You don't need to perform certainty you don't actually possess. You don't need to outrun uncertainty to prove your strength. Sometimes strength sounds quieter than people expect. Sometimes it looks like patience, like observation, like restraint, like disciplined peace. Sometimes strength looks like you're moving at the pace of clarity. This is The Quiet Maverick. I'm Gregory Michael. Thank you for being here with me today. I don't take your attention lightly, because where you place your attention is where your life begins to move. If something in this episode resonated with you, don't just scroll past it. Sit with it. Reflect on it. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. This is how we keep the signal moving. And if you haven't already, follow the podcast on all platforms so we can continue to build this space together. Quietly, but with intention. Until next time, move with clarity and let intention set the pace.